I should say entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs. My name is Qamar Rizvi, and I'm here as someone who has ventured into entrepreneurship, and I'd like to share my thoughts with you, my ideas, my insights, and I hope those thoughts and insights can give you some valuable nuggets of information, can add some value. The first, I guess, area that I would like to tackle today in our discussion is this whole notion about entrepreneurs that are not born, but entrepreneurs that are made. Now, I don't know if you have actually given that some thought, but as I was preparing my thoughts for this presentation today, I did give it some thought, and it was very clear to me that that is a true notion, at least in my case. I firmly do believe that entrepreneurs are not born, they actually are made. But what does that really mean? What does it mean when we say entrepreneurs are made? I mean, can I get some feedback on that? Any thoughts that you may have when we say, you know what, entrepreneurs are not born, they're made. What are they made of? Any thoughts?
We believe that at the Institute, in our curriculum, that they are born out of their life's experiences. They are born out of their mother's womb, all the same, but entrepreneurs are born out of their life's experiences.
Exactly. Sorry, go ahead.
And essentially, it's a mindset, it's the way you look at things, what you aspire for, and how badly you want it. And that's why we put together the entrepreneurs out here with a hope that with an accelerated exposure of 30 sessions with those, something will rub off. So it will be a kind of an accelerated exposure and experience. But yes, passion is one thing which always comes across as the number one in the case of entrepreneurs. And that we relate it as what you like and what you've been through and how badly you want it.
Well said, absolutely well said. Any other thoughts perhaps, by the way?
You know, I think, at least in my thinking, I think it's dissatisfaction that brings out the entrepreneur in you.
Dissatisfaction with your
With
current
the status
situation?
quo, wherever you are. That's probably what it is. Like, if you look at Facebook, not being satisfied by what's available, I guess,
True.
or BlackBerry, or anything that you look at. Even other than technology, I think that's true.
Makes a lot of sense, absolutely.
First and foremost, I believe you have to have a personality which wants to take action. If you do that, then the probabilities are that you will see opportunities. The issue with regards to born as opposed to being made is that you need training or some form of mentoring, some way of learning how to be more effective, given that you've got the will to do something and the ability to recognize opportunity.
Absolutely. Makes sense.
Entrepreneurs are made in the sense that they are not discouraged by the circumstances. They remain persistent. They have the belief, and it's a guiding light which is always propelling them no matter what the odds, and eventually they succeed. Like Vinod Khosla most recently in one of the, I believe in Thai Global's presentation, he mentioned this. If you keep hitting at a problem, you'll finally solve it. So your chances increase the more you try. So same thing. So I think that's how the entrepreneurs are
Absolutely
made.
valid. Absolutely valid.
I think the entrepreneurs, they want something challenging. They need something which they can satisfy their own.
I'll repeat it.
They need something challenging. They want some challenge. They want something unique and different and satisfying. And that is where the drive comes up. And that's how the entrepreneurship comes out. And that's my understanding.
The thought was that entrepreneurs are looking for something that's challenging, something that drives them to achieve a certain goal or an objective. And all these thoughts are definitely valid. And the reason why I asked that, by the way, because today we're talking about idea generation for your business, but I do think there's a step before that that happens, which I guess you could call the moment of reckoning. That you really reckon and reconcile in your mind that, you know what, you want to become an entrepreneur. And what is it that, what factor, you know, ignites this willingness or this drive to become an entrepreneur? And all of these reasons are valid reasons, and they're absolutely applicable reasons. In my particular case, if I were to, I guess, share it with you, it would be experience. Your experience, your background is what actually allows you to become an entrepreneur. Rafiq shared one of the slides that talked about the best source of ideas. I believe that's what it was basically titled, for entrepreneurs.
40%
40%,
job, 20% drive, interest.
Exactly. Your personal background, your job, it was a good source of ideas in terms of you know, running your own business or entrepreneurship. And that certainly was the case with me, and that's why I basically brought that up. In my case, our company helps businesses expand into international markets, simply said. Now, if you know my background and if you know where I've come from, you could encapsulate that in 2 words: global citizen. So clearly the fact that I had, you know, lived and traveled in so many different markets and so many different places, you know, was an influencing factor that eventually determined, you know, my path to entrepreneurship. In terms of more specific, I guess, aspects of my background, I started off with the Gillette company. And Gillette, as you guys are aware, is a multinational company. It's has offices and in various parts of the world. And I was fortunate to actually have handled several international assignments with Gillette that actually exposed me to all these different international markets. One particular aspect, I guess, of my experience is what I would like to talk about sort of today briefly. And the reason why I'd like to talk about it is because that experience with Gillette really determined my path to entrepreneurship. And that experience was when we launched the Mach 3 razor. I was fortunate enough to be handpicked by the company to launch the Gillette Mach 3 razor out of Boston across several international markets worldwide. And that to me was a very memorable experience. And it was memorable for 3 reasons. One was because when I came to Boston and when I took over the project, at that time Gillette had already invested $750 million in this razor. Now we're not talking about an aircraft here, we're not talking about a car, we're talking about a razor, where the company went ahead and invested $750 million. So clearly it was an important project. It was a flagship product for the company. And I was told in very clear, concise terms that if this project fails, we are not facing a failure in the product, but we're facing a failure of the company. It would really actually impact the actual existence of the well-being of the company. So clearly it was a very important project. So that was one reason why it was very memorable. Second was that unlike any other product that was attempted in the past, and I believe this is not only true with packaged goods, but I believe it's true with any other product or service. It was, Gillette was launched simultaneously on a worldwide basis in one day. So it wasn't a staggered launch. For instance, I also worked on the launch of sensor razor prior to Gillette. And initially, there were two markets or regions that were selected for the launch. One was Canada, and the other one was Europe, Germany. So, but that was staggered once we sort of developed that launch, and then we went into different international markets. But with Mark III, it was all worldwide in one day. So that was what was unique about the Mark III razor. And the third part that was so memorable about this whole experience, which at that time I was not really aware of, but I realized and I saw firsthand how when you combine new product innovation, which was the case with Mark III, with the globalization, how you can actually deliver growth on steroids, literally. I mean, Mark III achieved $1 billion in sales in 18 months. So you take a new product innovation and you put a layer of new markets on a worldwide basis. To me, I saw that for the first time, the power of globalization, the power of new market expansion, how that can really achieve sales lift on. And in businesses that exist today and the businesses that will exist tomorrow, one fact is very, very clear. Globalization obviously will play like a very big role. And not just, by the way, for companies. We have all seen that globalization has not just impacted a company like Gillette, but it has also impacted countries and economies and nations. I mean, India and China come to mind as very vivid examples. Just a few decades ago, India, before the 1990s, wasn't what it is today, and that's because of globalization. Same thing for China. Imagine if you take away, international trade, international business from India, from China, what are you going to do to those countries, to those nations? You're going to bring them down to the knees, because that's what they thrive on. And not just the big countries of India and China, but you have, smaller countries like, Hong Kong, or smaller territories, if you will. Singapore, Hong Kong, Dubai, where I lived, and I saw firsthand again how it transformed itself because of the forces of globalization, international trade. Today, Dubai is the third largest re-export center in the world. Chile, Korea, Taiwan, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The power of globalization is real, and it's significant. It has single-handedly taken, living standards and raised them to a whole new level. So, and I'm sharing all of that with you because my path to entrepreneurship it happened when I came back to Canada after Gillette. And you can imagine when I came back to Canada, I realized, and that's my moment of reckoning, if you will. I realized how we in this country had somehow missed the rise of globalization. Did we miss it completely? No. But we didn't take advantage of it, as did other nations and countries. Practically almost, most of the major countries in the world, be it Europe, be it Africa, Middle East, Asia Pacific, they all took advantage of this, force of globalization. Canada was an exception. We often compare ourselves to Australia. Well, Australia took advantage of it as well. We, however, did not. And that's where the seed of entrepreneurship, I guess, formed in my mind. And it's not surprising. And I'm, again, going back to my background, back to my experiences. And that played like a role. Because from my vantage point, I thought, you know what? I could offer significant added value to companies and executives who were looking to get international. And Rafiq, by the way, took you through the whole selection criteria. Looking at it, I thought it was extremely interesting, and I thought it was very, very useful, because there is a structured way to go about doing this. And in some respects, I went along those lines as well, because the idea on its own, the willingness to become an entrepreneur, and the ability to make a difference and to bring about a change was not enough. What I had to do was validate that idea. And some of the steps that I took was to actually, I went and talked with my potential customers. I met executives, and my idea turned more and more into conviction, because if you really look at the landscape of Canadian management suites, you really realize how our leaders have failed on the global arena consistently and decisively, even the good ones. I'm not saying all of them did, but I'm saying a bunch of them did. And I'm not here to name examples or companies, but think about the major companies that exist today in Canada, and think about those companies, how many of them have a global footprint. And you'll really get amazed at saying, wow, these guys have somehow missed this whole opportunity. So I did that research to talk to my customers, and I did all the other aspects that Rafiq talked about. One of the things that I would like to mention, though, that helped me at least personally, as a selection criteria, what do I want to become an entrepreneur? Do I want to take this step? Was passion. And this is a selection criteria that I really wanted to single out with you over here, because I think, at least in my case, it really made a significant difference. Why? Because nothing significant was ever achieved without passion. If you have a passion for an idea, or if you have identified a business need that you feel is unfulfilled, unmatched by the current competitors in the marketplace, and if you have a passion to deliver on that need, then you will succeed. I don't think it's actually surprising, by the way, because when you look at any ideas, any businesses that have succeeded in the past, and if you look closely, one of the common denominators you will see is passion. It was there with Henry Ford with the car, the Wright brothers with the airplane, Steve Jobs had it with the iMac, iPad, iPhone. Steve Jobs' passion, along with innovation and other aspects, by the way, really drove the business from negligible levels in the late 90s to where it is basically today. So in my case, I really was passionate about helping companies get global, because I had seen the power of this globalization forces on companies as well as countries. So I wanted to share that with you. If you're looking for an idea, or if you already have an idea and you're running a business, I think you would be well advised to do a passion test. Are you passionate about what you're doing? You know what? Yes, it makes sense to look at aspects that you're not satisfied with what you're doing right now. It makes sense, on all the other criteria, but I think passion is key. Now, passion alone, though, is not enough if you want to validate that idea. And in my case, what I basically looked at are some of the thoughts and the areas that Rafiq basically took you through. Look at the market forces. Look at the market trends. Now, in my particular case, this whole need for globalization was there. It was there. I mean, on this chart, what I share with you is a timeline of global trade as compared to domestic trade. And the red portion is global trade, obviously, and the yellow portion is domestic trade. And one of the things that really jumps out is that globalization is really not a new phenomenon. It's been happening since the 1900s. The second thing is that if you look at the 1990s, and if you look at the rise of globalization in terms of overall trade, it jumped dramatically from 35% to 60%. And it's not surprising that that coincides with the opening up of markets of China, of India. Now, China happened like before, it happened in the 1980s, late 1970s, but it really took on a whole new level and scale around that point in time. So you're looking at 70 years from the 1900s to the 1970s, which is at 20%. and then you're looking at 60% to where it is today, and McKinsey estimates it's going to go up to 80%. So the market forces were in my favor. But I was saying that, look, I'm going to help Canadian companies get global. That told me that the market forces were in my favor. So that sort of validated my idea, if you will, in a more tangible way. It was a fact, not an opinion anymore. So that helped. I do have a quote here which I absolutely love on globalization. And it was by this famous economist called Paul Erdman. And he talked about this force that's happening. What we're experiencing today is a process of globalization that is as irreversible as it is inevitable. That we now live in an age when goods, capital, technology, and people are free and able to move from continent to continent on a scale and speed unimaginable just a couple of decades ago. And that it is those who take advantage of these realities who will be the prime producers of wealth in the 21st century. I think it's a fabulous quote that really encapsulates this whole opportunity. And I wanted to be part of it because I know, because I, at that time, this is about 5 or 6 years ago, I sort of realized Canadians, were not sort of part of this whole movement. So again, that's, I thought like a helpful quote that is, that helped me in my sort of decision, if you will. But not only countries and economies, I mean, if you look at North America and Europe, the developed economies of the world, to a certain extent, Australia as well, they're all, I mean, if you're a business operating in this part of the world, you're really hungry for growth. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether you're in retail, electronics, computers, real estate, it doesn't matter. Companies are facing anemic growth, and they're looking for new avenues to deliver growth. Well, if you look at international markets, and I don't think I'm going to surprise anyone or wow anyone, that's the one thing that you do have. You have spending consumers. And I thought the best way to illustrate that was not really like a bullet point or a chart, was to actually give you like a visual perspective, like a picture is worth 1,000 words. This picture, and forgive me if the quality is not very good, but I took this when I was in Dubai on an assignment with one of my clients. And this is a store, it's called Carrefour, for those of you that may not have heard about it. And it's a mass merchandiser store, it's just like a Loblaws. And they sell electronics, they sell food, they sell groceries, clothes, what have you. And that's just a snapshot of, if you will, shoppers buying their stuff. And frankly, I think it's a little bit intimidating. I mean, if a grocery aisle looked like that here in Canada, I think we'd be laughing to the bank in terms of growth. That chart is not really surprising when you actually do look at the facts. And we've already, seen and read about so many, articles and news clippings about this rising middle class. But do we really know? Do we really realize what the proportion of that middle class is? And here I just took China and India, and as you can see, by the year 2025, 82% of their population, these are billion-dollar nations, 82% of their populations, according to the definition of McKinsey, will be middle class. And this includes anybody but poor, by the way. So this includes income levels of the lower middle class, which is 10,000 and above, all the way up to the globally affluent. It's a pretty big number. The Wall Street Journal had a very good quote on this. Asia will assume the traditional role of the US and European middle classes, contributing 43% of worldwide consumption in the next 23 years. Again, it was a great fact that helped to validate my idea about helping companies get global. Why? Because they could seek out this growth that they weren't getting here in these North American markets. Size and scale, and I believe this is my last chart. Globalization doesn't only give you growth, but it gives you size and it gives you scale. That's what China has. You have economies of scale. These are 3 examples of Canadian companies that have done very well for themselves, their shareholders and their stakeholders, by looking at global markets. And they looked at global markets at a very early stage. So if you think, globalization, international expansion is for the large companies, well, they're large because they took up globalization at a very early stage. Gillette, within its first 5 years, entered into international markets. So did McCain, by the way. So did Research in Motion. Research in Motion is a company that's less than 15 years old in terms of their BlackBerry product, which is what really went global. And you can see the size and scale of these companies. So in conclusion, that's my last chart. In conclusion, 3 thoughts that I wanted to share with you. Number one, when you're looking at idea generation, look at your own background, look at your own experience, and seek out your business idea that's based on your background and based on your experience. Number 2, locate passion. If that idea is, gives you a passion to fulfill that need or to go about with that idea, then you're probably one step in the right direction. And third, go through the structural and methodical way that Rafiq talked about, which is doing your market research, talking to the customers, looking at the trends, looking at the forces, and in a way I did that myself, and that really helped validate my idea about becoming an entrepreneur. So I hope those thoughts helped you, and I'm open to any sort of questions after, I guess, in the last stage, because I think I'm up for my time. Is that correct?
Thanks.
Okay.